Okay, and we're live. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for the OpenJS Foundation Monthly Ask Me Anything. Today's topic is a great one. We're going to be talking about the OpenJS Foundation's Node.js certification program. We have a great lineup, and I'm really excited to hand it over to Robin Ginn, OpenJS Foundation's Executive Director, who will be moderating today's AMA. Over to you, Robin.
Hey, thanks, Rachel. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the OpenJS Foundation AMA. We have David Mark Clements and Adrian Estrada joining us, two of our top experts on the Node.js certification program. So really looking forward to hearing your questions and having them provide us a lot of great information. Before we get started, I think there's a couple of ways that you could submit questions to us during the AMA. One, you can tag us on Twitter at OpenJSF, or you can ask us a question on YouTube channel directly using the chat function there. And we also have some pre-submitted questions, so thanks everyone for sending those along. So I'm gonna just give a quick handoff to Dave and Adrian to introduce themselves. Dave?
Thanks. Hey, everyone. I'm Dave, and I'm the technical lead and primary author of the certifications, which we'll be talking more about. So yeah, excited about being here. Excited to being asked anything.
Great, Adrian.
Hey everybody, so I'm Adrian Estrada. I am the VP of Engineering of Outsource. We are the creators of the test, and also we provide the support required for everybody taking it. So yeah, we are here to solve any question you have.
Awesome. So I think when I met you two first, maybe in person, it was backstage in Montreal at Node.js Interactive. I think that was the first time that you all had met in person as well, although you had been working for a long time. Just quick tell us where you're based and how you all started working together when it all started.
Oh, you're mute, my friend.
Yeah, sorry about that. So I'm based in Amsterdam. But I think when we started, I was actually based in Northern Ireland. We kicked off everything in Austin. And as you say, finally got to meet each other in Montreal. So yeah, it's been a long journey. But we've been working together on this quite seriously in the last year or so, especially since we launched end of last year. Yeah, it was. I'll let Adrian take it from where he is, but one of the highlights of being able to meet up was the coffee that Adrian gave me. It was great coffee, and I need some more of it, please, Adrian.
Well, okay, that's nice. Nice to hear. So I'm from Colombia. That's why I always bring some coffee for my friends.
That's why the coffee was so good.
So yeah, well, I have been involved with the certification since we started helping with the creation of the content. Basically, this was after the process that the community did. So we started, putting some order into a little bit chaos that was created at that time. We have to change the provider. There are so many things that we did, and really, really cool to actually finally meet Dave. I guess we were working for a year before, right? So a year before actually met and present the certification in Montreal. So that was a cool experience. Yeah, it was a real pleasure to meet you both there, and the event I think was the perfect platform to launch both certification exams.
Great. And so once you all decided to put together the certification plan, that idea was sort of born in the Austin event. What steps did you take to pull that content together?
Yeah, so it was kind of an organic process to begin with. We went through different phases. So initially, we had quite a few community contributors involved in the early stages, and we had a good cross section of the industry, even represented in the setting the themes, setting the topics, domains, and even breaking it down into tasks. So there were people from GoDaddy there, Netflix, Walmart. There were independent people.
Very cool.
There was that Node Source was there. Nearform was represented by myself. Yeah, we had I think that I don't know what you call it, that concept where you've got a lot of beans in a jar, and then if you have enough people from enough backgrounds guessing how many beans are in there, the average turns out to be like very accurate. I feel like from those initial inputs in those initial meetings we had, we got somewhere pretty decent in terms of what the level should be, and how and actually even how to approach it, even from a philosophical basis. And then from there we had the actual authoring stages, where after we'd defined the domains and we'd broken it up into tasks, those tasks were then implemented via GitHub, via pull requests and issues and different things like that, by community members to a certain extent. And then because it was a community initiative, and because of different changes even in the organizations around it, we moved towards a different model in order to bring everything together. And that's when we sort of hit the accelerate pedal, put our foot on the gas, and sort of brought all of those ideas and that content together and curated it and pushed it forward. Then during that time, Adrian came in and really helped with the operational side of it, making sure that we had confidence with what we were working with, because in terms of developing the certification, it's not just about the content. It's about the actual software. We wrote software that actually validates the candidate's answers, and provides a marking scheme and different things like that. So it's a lot more going on than just like what kind of question would validate
more than multiple choice.
Skill.
Yeah,
much more than multiple choice. Yeah,
for sure.
But we can talk more about the questions as we go.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, that part was quite tricky. I mean, when we started checking the content, it definitely wasn't about the content. It was basically about putting something together that made sense, because there were so many different items. Well, we have the domains really clear, but we have to tweak the content, and then is the technical part also. That part we were thinking in integrating first with a provider that we thought was the one, but in the middle we had to actually change the format for all content in order to adapt to a better experience for the people taking the test. So yeah, that part was quite difficult. But
great.
yeah.
Sounds like we had a lot of wonderful experts involved. I think we'll learn more about those other folks soon. We had some questions pre-submitted, and one question was, could it be possible to have feedback on the exam, like which exercises were okay, which ones were not? How do you handle that feedback?
Well, that's a good question. we, as far as I know, we have the logistical capacity to do that. I don't know that we have that signed off specifically. The only mechanism that is in place for that currently is to ask for a manual remark, which we would prefer to keep at a minimum because of the labor overhead of that. So I think that's something that we should maybe have a discussion about in the next team meeting, to see if we can provide better feedback on that. But the technical pieces are in place to do that. So if what we could also do is on request, we could probably provide that information. Okay. But we don't have an official process for that right now. I guess that comes down to the foundations and how we want to manage that moving forward.
Okay, great. Well, we always have an open door. You can email me directly or DM us. Adrian, do you want to provide some more context?
I want to add a little bit. Yeah. So yeah, we have I guess we have the technical capacity to do this. We have the data, right? I guess it's a matter to find a way to actually expose it to every candidate. But it's not just having manual checks, which is actually, quite difficult. For your information, every time someone asks for a manual check, someone, a real person, has to actually take and validate that code for the whole test, for all the items in the exam, for make sure that the score is right. 99% I would say is right. So yeah, I guess to integrate a feedback will actually decrease that petition, because at the end is what people is actually looking for, right? So they deserve more, I think, and it's a good idea. We should work toward to have a better solution.
Yeah. Well, there was more of a scientific approach you all took early on, that psychometric analysis. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. This has been a fantastic underpinning thing to this whole process, and we started with a psychometrician right in the beginning.
Can you explain what that is, a psychometrician?
Yeah. So it's basically the measurement. It's basically sort of analytical, sort of an analytical feedback loop on the efficiency of a question to reveal information about a candidate's knowledge within a given threshold. So there's more to it than that. We had a psychometrician who actually advised us from the very beginning, and they were the one who gave us the process of even creating the certification and the examination. But it's really about the analysis of, basically statistical analysis of how people interact with the examination and what results we get. So if we have too many people failing a question, or if we have too many people passing a question, that can indicate that we're not getting the information that we need about the candidates for that thing. It needs to be challenging enough. It needs to be within the threshold. So we started off with a psychometrician who guided us in terms of creating it, and then we got feedback from them once the tasks were complete, and then once we deployed it, we also had a psychometrician analyze, once we had enough people take the exam, analyze the feedback, and then we adjusted. We didn't need to adjust any of the questions on the services developer exam, but we had to adjust, I think, 3 or 4 on the application developer, which we've actually not talked about yet as what the 2 certifications are.
Right.
Should we do that?
That's a good idea.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So so what we're talking about here is the OpenJS Node application developer certification and the OpenJS Node services developer certification. So these are
two separate exams sold
two separate
separately.
exams, two
Yep.
separate certifications, but both kind of interrelated at the same time, because originally we built one, but we had we measured out how long the questions would take, as we expected for an intermediate to upper intermediate developer, and we realized that we'd created a 5-hour exam, which is exhausting.
No, yeah.
So we reduced some of the content. We chopped some of the questions, and we reduced some of the intensity of the questions, but that was still too big. And so then we ended up creating two separate exams. So the application developer is if you take that certification, you're demonstrating your understanding of Node.js as a whole. You understand how FS, the file system module, works. You understand how the Node CLI works. You understand how streams work. These are all domains that are covered. The Node services developer is a more pragmatic, kind of practical level certification to do with can you create the sort of services that you'll be creating in a startup or an enterprise on a daily basis. Basically RESTful JSON over HTTP services, and also security around web servers and web services. Do you know how to secure a web server against malicious user input, for instance? So these two exams kind of go hand in hand, and if you feel you're already proficient with services, you could go straight and take the services developer. Or if you feel you're already proficient in Node, sorry, you can go straight and take the services developer exam. But if you're going on a journey through the whole thing, you should take application developer first and then take services developer. They also differ in the question format. So the application developer is around 27, 28, something like that. Questions that take maybe 5 to 10 minutes each, right? Something like that. Whereas it's quite intense. Whereas the services developer is 6 questions, and you need the whole 2 hours to answer those 6 questions, because you have to piece things together, and you have to essentially know how to build services from scratch.
I think there is an easy way to explain the format. So let's say for the application developer certification, you can solve some questions with a single line of code. That's as easy. Take time and put significant code in the answer, right? So yeah.
So Adrian, can you just give us just a quick overview? How long do you get? How do you take the exam? Just so people have a better understanding.
So yeah, you will have 2 hours for both. Each exam will take up to 2 hours. You will have to solve the complete test in that amount of time. For the first one, as Dave was explaining, there are many questions, but as I was saying, it sometimes just a single line of code will do the trick, and it's kind of the case of, I would say, 60% of the test. So it's kind of, so if you know about these domains that we're testing about, that is basically general knowledge of of Node.js API, then it will be easy, right? For the services exam is quite different. It's definitely way less questions, but those will take, I would say, 10, 20 minutes, maybe top each. So you will have like 12 questions, I think, is what we have right now in services. So yeah, it's quite a different picture between both.
Can you get a little help along the way? I mean, how do you take it? Do you show up? Is it online? Can you check documentation?
Yeah, so basically, you can use the documentation for sure. I mean, we're not testing, your memory. We are testing your understanding of Node.js. So you can access the Node.js documentation. and remember all these things, you know, you need. But we don't allow to use Stack Overflow and similar sites. Like we don't want you to be copy pasting code from anywhere. So it's basically you can access the tools required to, you know, make you remember how to solve the exercise, but no actually copying and pasting without knowing you know if that's gonna solve it or not.
That makes
So yeah, basically you schedule your exam. You can actually pay for the exam and schedule it for later. You can, you know, we have sometimes some special pricing for it. So you can take advantage of those and then schedule for later. So that will give you the time to study. We supply some materials to study. We suggest some, right? But the main source is the Node.js documentation, of course. And when you
Oop, Adrian, we lost your audio for a sec.
can you hear me?
Now we can hear you. We said we could check
Okay.
the Node.js documentation, of course.
Yeah, of course you can check Node.js documentation. So when you're going to actually take the test, so you will show up at the scheduled time, and will be someone actually, you know, seeing all your activity in the exam. You will use a single browser window to, you know, to take the test. This browser window is connected to a Linux machine. You will have a Linux desktop. You will have Chrome and Visual Studio Code, Beam, and WebStorm editor that you can use to actually solve the exercise. And yeah, so from there is your knowledge and that machine. So you will have 2 hours to complete it.
Something so easy to take at home during quarantine, for sure. No,
Oh yeah.
it's all remote. Great. We did have a question on price, and it said it would be nice to have price differentiation based on country. They feel the price of the certification is too high, especially for some folks. This person said they're from India. Can we please look into that?
That is a great question, and it's one that we've been going over since the beginning. Actually, even in Austin, we discussed this. But it's a case of as far as I understand, to summarize the situation, and I think Robin, you know way more about this than me, to be honest. The situation is there's logistical complexity involved in geo pricing, and it is difficult to do it in a way that doesn't ultimately lead to the lowest price if worldwide because of VPNs. So rather than doing geo pricing, we're looking at approaching that a different way around scholarships and organizations and yeah, funneling essentially funding from the foundation into those scholarships. That does mean that it's extremely important that if you're a member of an organization, say in India, like a meetup or a slightly larger, maybe sort of developers or of different kinds, that they get in touch with the OpenJS Foundation so that we can create those connections to deliver those scholarships through. But I'll let you take over from here, Robin, because you know way more about this. I think you put a blog post about this out recently.
Yeah,
right?
we did blog. I think it was shortly after I joined. The full price of the certification is $300. We try to offer many sales throughout the year. You know, the kind of the pre-holiday sale in November is always a big one, often around our conferences in summer. So if I would really encourage you to look at that. I'd encourage you to talk to your employer, and we could perhaps offer some corporate discounts and kind of a group sales. But again, if you all really want to take the exam, until we have the scholarship program in place, I'd encourage you to reach out to us. Or if you're a nonprofit and can help us scale some of those programs, that would be great too. Cool. Before I get into some other things, one of the other questions we had pre-submitted was, what criteria do you use to choose new NPM packages?
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's a good.
Yeah, you go first,
Well-
Adrian, and then I'll take it as well. It's a big question.
Oh, I'm a bit biased on that one. Anyway, so I will try to explain as much as, you know. Okay, let's see. So for me, it's important the community behind a tool that I'm going to use all the time. So the first parameter I will choose is if this tool is being used and being supported by the community, right? Talking about open source. So I will check the activity in GitHub, if this is a not very, knowledge module, then I will definitely go and check all the activity there and see how many versions they released in the last year. And that's the first thing. The second thing I do is to check dependencies, because that's important, right? So you need to know, maybe the module is solid and is pretty well maintained, but has some dependencies that definitely, are not as good. So that's the second parameter I use. And the third parameter I use is a tool my company does, is not certified modules, which basically is a security scanner and quality scanner for modules. So if after the first two parameters I had, the module is good, I just run this tool, and if that comes clean, then that's how I adopt a new module in my projects. I guess David has a different view for this.
Yeah, no disagreements there. But I would just add more nuance to the selection process and the evaluation process. So basically, there isn't really a one shoe fits all, because you have to consider what it is you're even looking at, right? So if you're looking at a utility module that does something specific, then that's very different to looking at a framework, because what a framework does is it solves many problems for many different people in one go. So a framework that's gotten any level of success is going to have a lot of GitHub stars, right? And it's going to have a lot of downloads as well. But a utility module that's niche, it might not have any stars at all. So you have to evaluate it on a different basis. So you have two major approaches in the ecosystem. You find this more with Node than with the front end. On the front end, it's more of a framework approach in general. On the back end of Node, there's the frameworks, and then there's individual modules. And in some cases, the frameworks are actually made of individual modules. But if you take someone like Matthias Booz, who's Alice's Macintosh, or Cindersaurus, these two authors, they're prolific in that they create, and Substack and Dominic Tarr are the older guys of this, but they create lots and lots and lots of small modules. So on those ones, I just named 4 authors, and those are 4 authors that I trust because I've seen their work and they're consistently good. So when it's a small module by one of those authors for something specific that I want to do, I'm less interested in the download count and the stars, and I'm more interested in the problem that they solved. Also, typically with these kind of modules is that they're very small. So, you're a programmer, you're a developer, you can go and look at the code on GitHub and see the quality of it and see how they've done it. And actually that can really help you get inspired and actually even change the way that you approach problems. When it comes to frameworks, it's different, because that can just be pure downloads and pure framework and pure GitHub stars. But that leads to another issue. If you're looking at frameworks for a large org strategy, so say you're part of an enterprise company and you're all collectively deciding, hey, what framework should we be using for HTTP, right? And the big ones in the space are Happy, Express, Fastify, and so forth. You can look at the downloads of a framework and be blown away by the sheer amount of them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you should opt with that framework, because at a certain point, the network effect kicks in, where downloads occur because downloads are occurring. So you also have to be careful with the way that you evaluate that. You need to look at the age of the project. You need to look at when was it last updated? What are the commitments by the by the team behind that web framework to release schedules? What are the commitments to maintaining older versions? How have they behaved in the past? So like these are all things to take into account as well when it comes to like, you know, larger decisions around frameworks too. So it's always you have to contextualize the decision you're making. One final thing on this is when you're looking at a module, as I say about the release schedule, you expect a good release schedule commitment for frameworks, right? Particularly in the Node ecosystem, it moves very quickly. JavaScript moves very quickly. Node moves very quickly versus other platforms. But when we're talking about small modules, again, there can be a module that's not been touched for 2 years and it's still perfect for your use case, because some things, they're not moving targets. Some things are just like, I need something that converts, say, RGB to HSL. Like that's a fixed problem. Other things, they are moving targets. So you need to define like, what is it that you're looking for? What are the attributes of it? And then you assess based on those other criteria that Adrian was talking about. And also just build up a repertoire of authors that you trust. And you can kind of figure that out also by doing research, and also just the amount of modules that they produce. Like it indicates their level of quality as well. Because if you've got someone who's produced 780 modules, for instance, like, yeah, there might be a couple of bad ones in there when they were first starting out, but eventually they've gotten into a flow where it's pretty good.
That's
and
super
then they'll fix the odd ones.
Yeah, super interesting. I feel like that's like a blog waiting to be written. We had a question that just came in from Twitter on, again, using Node.js documentation during the exam. Are test takers able to use Google or MDN?
You can use both. I mean,
Yes.
We don't have a problem for you Googling or checking any documentation. You know, the only, condition there is basically don't use Stack Overflow or something like that to copy and paste code. That's it.
Got it. It doesn't slow people down. I mean, your experience, I think there's a link to the documentation on every test question, right? To make it easy for folks, so.
Yeah, there's like a sort of a banner thing where you can go to the documentation, but for MDN, there's not a link to MDN, but we wanted to do, we support doing it that way because we recognize like the way I develop, I don't retain information in my head. I retain references in my head, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I forget how to use Splice all the time, and then I have to go and search it. And so it's fine to do that. It's totally fine to do that. That's a totally legitimate way to develop. Where we draw the line is going on to, say, Stack Overflow, like Adrian mentioned, and just cargo culting, because we can't establish that you know what you're doing if you're just copying and pasting pre-written examples. So that's where we strike the balance.
Got it. Let's talk about why somebody might want to take this exam or both exams. What value and benefits does somebody gain?
You want to go first, Adrian? I'm kind of out of breath.
I can. Okay, well, so the exam is a tool, right? It's a tool to certify that you have the knowledge required to be certified at Node.js. So it's definitely something that the industry can use, and the applicants to jobs can use to demonstrate their knowledge. So there are some stories already about this, people actually taking the certification and demanding, and some job posts demanding the certification. This will avoid the complexity of hiring, which is a known problem for the industry. So it's definitely a tool that could help in that spectrum a lot. So
great.
Dave?
Yeah, we need in this industry, we need some way of measuring. We need an absolute measure. We need a KPI that is a line across the entire industry.
A KPI, a key performance indicator.
Yes, yeah. Because to be very candid, the JavaScript space is very large, and there's a lot of opportunity for creating creating the illusion of seniority without really having it, and there's multiple reasons for this. So and you can when we think of a senior JavaScript developer, again, it's very much dependent on context. So the first thing is, in an enterprise company, seniority isn't really, if we're honest about it, it isn't really about how proficient you are in the language. It's about how much you've understood the business domain and then being able to apply your current level of the language to solving for that business domain. So people are often promoted to senior developer in enterprise companies, not all the time, but this is a general trend I've observed as part of my consultancy, based on their business domain knowledge, and that's totally okay. But when you're looking to hire, you're looking to hire not based on necessarily the business domain knowledge. You're looking to hire based on the programming skill level and the generic capabilities of being able to do that transformation from business into good quality code that doesn't necessarily incur huge technical debt, right? Because the problem is that if you're not at an intermediate to upper intermediate level, the kind of technical debt you leave behind sets off a chain reaction that causes the projects to have to be rewritten essentially every 2 years. And this is a huge business cost. It's huge. So by having this standard in the industry, we are providing a stamp of approval for anyone who wants to take this to say, yes, this person has what it takes to, at a minimum, convert business domain problems into solutions that have a certain level of quality to them to reduce that technical debt that builds up over time. So we encourage people to take it because it's good for the industry in general. It's good for the community in general. There is some, the other thing I'll address as well is that there is some hesitation around certifications because they have been seen in the past as gatekeeping. And I do believe that there are certifications that are like that, particularly ones with very high price points. It definitely skews to the people that have the luxury and the privilege to be able to afford those, or who have already got employers that can pay for them for those people. Yes, we need to address the disparity, the global disparity of it, but this exam relative to other exams is very affordable compared to those other exams. And so this is a route to entering the space, or to leveling up in the space that is compatible with other routes, right? People go through the boot camps, they go through getting degrees, and these are very different things. Like a 4-year degree versus a 9-week boot camp, they are different things. This in itself is a learn at your own pace. We haven't talked about the Linux training yet, but I'm sure we'll come to that. This is a learn at your own pace thing that you can sort of go as fast or as slow as you want to get this verification, this validation that you know what you're doing, and it's as simple as that.
I love that. That levels the playing field for developers. Yeah, for sure. Adrian, did you have anything to add? No, that's pretty interesting. Yeah, I think the Linux Foundation training and certification team, they're world-class, and we're supported by them with our experts. When you talk about after you complete the exam, I mean, how do you demonstrate that capability publicly? Or should I explain the whole digital badge concept? Or you want me to, I'll just sort
Okay.
of, you want to take it?
I need to charge my earphones for a second.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about that. Okay. So yeah, when you get certified, you get a badge that you can publish on your profiles. So on your social profiles, you can actually wear this badge and demonstrate that you're certified by the OpenJS Foundation. And yeah, definitely something you really would like to have in your LinkedIn profile, for example. So yeah. People looking for Node.js developers definitely will take a look at those badges.
Yeah, it's true. I think the last in-person conference I went to, I was talking to some recruiters there, and they were saying Node developers are kind of in the top 3 categories of devs that they're hiring. So that's super cool. Let's see. Another question that we had is, you all had talked about this in one of your breakout sessions you did at OpenJS World, which I thought was pretty interesting, about some of the kind of, you touched on it earlier, but can you expand on some of the principles and that you really put in place before you established the exam?
Yeah. So we wanted it to be, hopefully the sound is coming across okay here. We wanted it to be practical in nature. We kind of set a line in the sand early on that we want to avoid kind of steering into a puzzle solving dynamic. We're not trying to catch you out. We're not trying to do weird brain puzzles. It's that classic kind of criticism of a lot of the interviewing techniques in the industry around, not really real world problems that are more about like brain teaser kind of style. That's not what we wanted to do, and I believe that we achieved that. Based on the testimonials, we've got some great testimonials that say things like, I like how this mirrors real world problems. So what the approach that we took is we took the domain and we took the topic and we made tasks out of that would in some way relate to something that you would probably do in your day job, particularly for the services exam, but also to an extent for the application developer exam as well. So it's about problem solving. It's not about puzzle solving. It's about providing a solution to a problem that you're likely to face in the real world. Even if to a certain extent it is contrived and it is abstracted, it's close enough that you can make that jump in your mind to when you actually come to face that problem and go, oh yeah, I can do this, that bridges that gap. So that's really the main drive and the main philosophy. And it's, if I can plug my cookbook, I wrote a book called Node Cookbook. It's currently in its 3rd edition, and from the first edition, it was always about that. It was always about hands-on, practical ways of learning, because it's how I learn. And this is one of the reasons I love JavaScript. I love that, and it's another reason I learned. The first language I learned was BASIC, because they both, JavaScript and BASIC, both share the same thing, where you put something into the command line or the REPL and you get something out straight away. That's why I love DevTools and playing around in that. So you have this kind of pragmatic feedback. It doesn't get lost in the theoretical. You don't have to retain so much state in your mind before you kind of press the button. And that same mindset for me is translated to the book, and it's translated to the way that we did the certification as well.
Right. It does sound much more approachable, I think, than maybe a certification sounds. You think theory and complexity, puzzles. How much experience, maybe Adrian, you can touch on this. How much experience should somebody have before they take the exam? Like,
Okay,
you know,
that's a bit tricky.
it's a hard
But
question. But it's, I think, one
yeah,
we get all the time. Yeah.
I mean, okay, let's split this answer in 2. So for application development exam, you definitely need some good general knowledge about Node. So what I will recommend is, if you don't have a lot of experience with Node, go over the documentation for all different domains that we test. Those are described in the, in the exam profile, so you can see all different topics that you will be, facing. So yeah, go over that documentation really, really well, because all the answers are basically there. So that one is easier to take it, for someone that is starting with Node. But for the services certification, you definitely need some good experience writing applications like web servers, and be familiar with practices, with security practices that are required for this kind of application. So that will require, I would say, like some, I would say, more than junior experience in Node.js. So.
Although I would interject that we can fast track some of that, because currently we have the, I think it's the LFW 12 by the Linux Foundation, which is the training for the application developer certification. And there's the soon to be released services developer application, services developer certification training as well, which I'm working on, and currently in the middle of doing, and I promise I'm going to have it done soon.
Oh, great. Yeah, I know the Linux Foundation having the training and the certification is a great way to, to get that whole package for sure.
Yeah, so I was asked by someone recently on Twitter DM, actually several people have asked this, is if I take the self-help training, will I be able to pass the exam? And my answer was, as long as you're proficient in JavaScript in general, you or at least proficient in a programming language, and you have some JavaScript familiarity, and then you take the training, and you're able to, with reading comprehension, understand the content in order to answer the exercises, then you should be able to pass the application developer certification. We're going to do the same thing with the services. So you do already need some context, but you can level up using the self-help training on the services one coming soon. But I advise taking the application developer one first anyway. So hey, look, if you book the training, you book your exam now, by the time you've done application, the services one will be out, right? So.
And I think what we're finding is people are buying the exam and then they're studying and then they're taking it. What happens, I mean, if they don't pass, or, what do you recommend?
You get a free retake. So if you don't, the thing is as well, you can schedule it for like 6 months out, which for some people works as a motivation to do the studying. So, and again, with the retake, you can schedule that a little way out as well. So definitely, for application developer, do the self-help training, because or find some training somewhere. Other tools that can help is actually looking through the documentation and applying the examples from the documentation. The Node documentation is quite a good resource. And there's also, I think we have some other things in the reading list, including the cookbook that I plugged earlier. It is for a slightly, it says for Node 8, but it still completely applies to 10 and 12. So yeah, those are good resources as well. But at a baseline, you need to know JavaScript to a degree, like to a certain level. You don't have to have a degree in JavaScript to pass these exams. What we should do is a JavaScript certification, just pure JavaScript, but that's a different conversation.
Cool. So we just launched the certification program in Chinese. Why don't you both talk about sort of how that came together and some of the challenges you had to overcome to implement a certification program in a different language?
I'll take this one first, and then Adrian, if you want to fill anything in. This has been a real fun experience, actually. I'm going to get real braggy right now, because the Node Cookbook was actually translated into Korean and Japanese, the first edition. And so it's been really awesome to see the certification translated into Mandarin. And so I've had a little bit of experience with that process before. Really on this one, it's been quite smooth because of the level of the translator that's been working with us on this, and also with the Daniel in the foundation coordinating things. So it's really just been a case of what the main challenge was marking out words that we feel would remain in English in other languages, which is a really hard thing to do because different languages have different completely different sort of cultures and ways they construct language and stuff. But you know, when it comes to programming, generally you're programming in English, and so there's terms where we're like, we know this is code. We're talking about, you know, returning from a function or something. But there's other terms that are kind of halfway.
Example words that you didn't translate. What are some of those?
So when we talk about piping from one stream to another, well, we're referring to the stream pipe method, but we're saying piping, so it's not a method, so we can't put it in code format. But in order to have like the fairness of indicating that to a Mandarin speaker, then we keep that word to say piping. But then ultimately it's up to the translator to decide that, because it might make more sense in Mandarin to actually translate that or not. So we had to mark out, I guess, I don't know, it's about like maybe 150 words, was it? Maybe 100 words throughout all of the certification that we had to sort of mark out as like, hey, this is actually like a term that you may or may not need to translate. That was the main effort, but it went very smoothly, and I'm really excited about it. It's so cool to see, you know, stuff that you've written in Mandarin, and then the code snippets and stuff. So yeah, we're really excited about that. I'm excited to see how that's taken up in those markets.
What I really love about this process was, you know, it was kind of easy. I mean, well, it wasn't easy for the translators, but I mean, the process was really smooth for the exam and the infrastructure we already had. So, and what exciting the most for me is basically that this opens the door to future translations. And I definitely, you know, would like to see this translated to Spanish, for example. That will help a lot of Latin American people to actually take the test. You know, removing this barrier is awesome. So.
Yeah, I remember the first conversations. It's like, do you need to program for different keyboards and all kinds of things? And it actually ended up. And the great thing is we had a couple of Node.js contributors in China volunteer their time. And we have a blog about them who provided that great contributor from Alibaba. So that was pretty cool. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. It was Vivian Lin was the main translator. And then it was Joy and, sorry, who was it? The other ones that helped out? Node Core ones?
I'd have to look up the name quickly in the blog, but we just posted a blog, I believe, a couple of weeks ago on that, and we'll be doing another feature soon. Cool.
Excellent.
Yeah, I don't know if now we've talked Chinese. Did we talk versions? I know we talked packages. I don't think talked about node versions.
Right. Yeah. This is a big topic as well.
Now we only have about 5 or 6 minutes left, but I think it was something that we maybe missed that we should probably hit before we wrap.
Yeah, we should totally cover that. So currently the certification is for Node 12. Actually, we stapled to, I think it's Node 12.3 because of ECMAScript modules. The examination was written before ECMAScript modules were introduced into Node. They've been introduced, but they're actually experimental. In the documentation, they are experimental, and we're not supporting experimental features. I believe the intention with Node Core is for Node 14 to take them out of being experimental by the time Node 14 becomes LTS. So there's a release schedule with Node where you have the current, which is the which is currently Node 14, and then you have the LTS, the long-term support version, which is currently Node 12. The LTS versions overlap at some point where a current version becomes a long-term support version, and that's happening with Node 14 in October. So with the certification, we want to map to at least the earliest LTS version. So it will be on Node 12. So for instance, in this April, Node 10 went from LTS into maintenance, and we had 12 and 10 in LTS. So we updated from 10 to 12 in April. What we might do this year is go to the very latest LTS and upgrade to 14 in October. If not, we'll be on 14 by April for sure. But it's most likely going to be in October. So we're mapping the certification has an evergreen quality to it, where we're mapping to the LTS version of Node, preferably the latest, which is what we're aiming for. And we also assess that, based on the content, based on changes in the industry and all that kind of thing. So we want to keep that fair. We're not trying to increase the difficulty at all, but we're trying to keep it relevant and keep it up to date. So we'll be supporting hopefully ECMAScript modules in Node 14 this year or early next year at the latest.
Cool. Great. Adrian?
I'm top level await.
No, that's good.
That one.
Yeah. Let's see, before we close, is there anything we missed that you think we should cover?
I mean, we already covered like a lot. Yeah, I think the questions were good. So
yeah, great. Well, you all have just been a pleasure to work with. We were meeting, I know, weekly, and now not maybe every other week, but it really is great to have such a solid team of experts working and getting all the feedback from the community. So really appreciate everyone who submitted questions for today's AMA. I think we'll have a recap on the OpenJS blog. And again, thanks for your time. Send us feedback, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
thanks, everybody.
Take care.